As Thelma approached the motel that served as their makeshift home, she noticed a red pickup truck pulling into the parking lot. The boys quickly surrounded it as the lot rarely contained anything other than their own car. Their excitement and curiosity ignited when they spotted a large, already decorated Christmas tree behind the wooden side panels of the truck bed. Thelma broke into a jog as the boys turned into an undisciplined mob, propelled by desperate hope for everything the season promised. It was apparent that whoever was inside that truck found it impossible to exit. She called out to her boys at the top of her voice, running through their names as if going through a roll call. George, Paul, Frank, Fred, Dale. By the time the roll call had been finished for the third time, they started to turn around and pay some attention to her. Standing with her hands on her hips, she instructed them sternly to go inside. "I will handle this from here, thank you." With maximum reluctance, the boys formed a string of suffering children, forced to keep their curiosity unsatisfied as they marched back inside. Once they exited the parking lot, Thelma turned toward the truck as the driver stepped out. In all the mayhem, she had failed to notice that he was dressed in a ragged version of a Santa Claus suit. Obviously, he was not Santa Claus. But how do you open a conversation with someone pretending to be Santa Claus? After an awkward moment, Thelma asked, "Who are you looking for?" "The Pence family," he responded. That led to a resumption of the awkward moment. "And why?" she asked. It was like she had just asked a question, the answer to which was painfully obvious. She might as well have asked, "Why do birds fly?" or "Why do dogs bark?" By the time he was ready to respond, a short, heavy-set man had stepped out of the vehicle and was standing next to the imitation Santa Claus. Santa's reply was brief, direct, and delivered with a sense of obviousness. "Well, my friend Juan and I are here to deliver Christmas," he said. Then Santa and Juan moved to the back of the truck as if no further explanation was necessary or even desired. After all, no one wants to answer stupid questions, especially when you're busy. And these two were extremely busy. However, Thelma would not be denied. She moved to the back of the truck and asked insistently, "And from whom is this Christmas coming?" she asked. But just then, the tailgate opened, revealing a large collection of beautifully wrapped Christmas presents. With that vision, the boys spilled back out into the lot, delirious with excitement. Thelma was overwhelmed both with the chore of restoring order and the need to make sure this ersatz Santa hadn't made a mistake that would make Christmas even crueler than it had to be. Santa and Juan quickly began their task. First, they went into the motel room, removing 2 rollaway beds and other miscellaneous furniture. What was left, they stacked or piled next to a wall. Then it was back to the truck, where Thelma only half effectively held back the tide. Santa grabbed the tree and handed it to Juan. Together, they took it inside, straightened the ornaments, and plugged in the lights before returning to the truck. With practiced efficiency, holding 2 or 3 at a time, they carried presents like a fireman's brigade and almost buried the tree. All the while, Thelma was chasing her hyperactive brood as Santa and Juan finished, she found herself at the far end of the parking lot, trying to corner a 3-year-old boy. As her hand tightened around his wrist, she heard a motor come to life, the transmission grind into reverse, and watched the now empty truck disappear into the dark. She was grateful and hopeful that there hadn't been an error, but she was also disappointed that she had no idea who to thank. They had lived in Berlin for nearly 2 years, but they were itinerants with no friends and no sense of belonging. How could they possibly be at the top of a church's priority list when they didn't belong to a church? What local agency would come to their assistance when Okies counted for so little and were almost universally rejected? With these thoughts going through her mind, Thelma turned her attention to the motel. She could see the boys climbing a mountain of gifts and trying to read the name tags. What had been a neatly stacked pyramid was now a scattered mess, and she knew those presents would soon begin to accidentally open. She stood in the doorway and once again called out the roll. George, Paul, Frank, Fred, Dale. Ultimately, repetition succeeded, and they surrendered to the custom of opening Christmas gifts on Christmas Day. Paul now recognized a problem that was the consequence of their happy miracle. The rollaway beds sat outside a room that was now full of Christmas presents. But on a cold night, sleeping outside was not an option. He looked up at his mother with an expression that didn't require further explanation. Thelma shrugged and opened one of the units they had previously vacated. Well, it's only for a night, she said. As activity started to settle and a willingness to wait for Christmas took hold, young George broke the quiet with a question. Where's Dad? A similar question had already crossed Thelma's mind, but she was grateful that the evening's distractions had postponed her need to tackle the issue with the boys. Just then, she received a break from having to do so. The raspy sound of the family's well-worn Packard interrupted her attempt to find a way to mislead without telling a lie. Little George was old enough to know better, but in a way that reminded Thelma of a long ago Christmas Eve, he ran toward his father and he called out, "Guess what, Dad? Santa Claus was here." He delivered that line with the conviction of a child half his age, and Thelma was charmed by its guilelessness. George gathered up his son and looked quizzically at Thelma. "Who was here?" he asked, emphasizing the who. Thelma, grateful to have him home, winked and said, "Yes, Santa was here." Then she smiled and assured him they'd talk later. "But for now," she called out to the boys, "it's time for bed. The presents will be here in the morning." Eventually, the boys were settled and making their best effort to pretend they were asleep. Then Thelma crooked her finger in the direction of her husband, and the two of them stepped outside. "Where have you been?" she whispered. "Actually, I had some luck," he replied. "As soon as I got downtown, I heard the railroad was looking for help. A culvert washed out and buried a siding. They needed help. And because of Christmas, only a few of us were available. They paid double. With that, he put his hand in his pocket and produced a $5 bill. Now tell me, what's with the Christmas tree and all those presents? Honestly, George, I'm not sure I can explain. Give it your best shot. Then Thelma reviewed everything that had happened and added, I don't like being a charity case any more than you do. But with the boys so excited, we can hardly say no. However, here's my concern. What if a mistake was made and those presents aren't meant for us? George thought momentarily. Well, did the Santa fella ask who you were? No, not exactly, but when I asked him who he was looking for, he said the Pence family. And did you ask him who sent all these presents? I tried, but just when the boys spotted all those presents, everything fell apart. Before there was another chance, he and his helper left without any explanation. George considered all she had said. Thelma, I think we can assume someone is being generous, and they have us in mind. The big mystery here is who that is. I am as clueless as you are. No one comes to mind. Thelma accepted his conclusion, even if her experiences over the last several years made it difficult to believe in good fortune. She suspected there had to be a trap door that would reveal all as a big mistake. She stood for a moment, the fingers of her right hand tracing her lower lip, a gesture that always meant she was trying to figure things out. Finally, Thelma gave up on trying to understand what couldn't be understood and assured her husband, I'm sure in the next few days someone will step forward and take credit. But for now, let's just go to bed. And so they did. George was exhausted, and he fell asleep quickly and soundly. Thelma was also exhausted, but the evening's mystery denied her any sleep, quick or sound. And the boys, with the near prospect of opening Christmas presents, spent most of the night inspecting the ceiling. At last, the sky provided just enough light to be an excuse for dawn. All 5 boys quickly occupied a bed that included their parents. At the foot of that bed stood the lighted tree, and a mountain of presents so eagerly anticipated they could have substituted for mankind's every hope and dream. George and Thelma drew themselves up to a sitting position and instructed little George to hand out the presents, one at a time and in order of age. Thelma expected a series of re-gifts and hand-me-downs, occasionally punctuated by something new but inexpensive. That is not what happened. Most of the gifts were not expensive, but every gift was new, and so appropriately selected that Thelma herself could not have done better. If a shirt was needed, a shirt was there in the right color and size. If pants were needed, pants were there in the right color and size. However, a far greater source of joy for the boys was receiving the very present they had put at the top of their individual list. George got his Red Ryder BB gun, Paul got his Buck Rogers ray gun, and Frank got his erector set. Now, Thelma knew that whatever the source of these gifts, they had to come from someone who knew them well, or at least knew the boys extremely well. She focused on the local elementary school, wondering if a teacher or the principal had been incredibly generous. After all, the boys hadn't exactly been quiet about their hopes for Christmas. So everyone at the school must have known what they wanted or were hoping for, and more to the point, what they needed. However, teachers weren't exactly flush. Most had children of their own, and how could they single out one family and not do it for others? Finally, the boys had opened every gift meant for them, but 2 presents remained. Until now, little George had avoided passing them out or even suggesting they were included in the pile meant for the boys. One was for his mother, and no one could imagine what it might be. Thelma had resolved not to share her hopes for fear of violating the desert of what her children could expect. So successful had she been that she had convinced herself that what she wanted was nothing. And yet here was something. She peeled back the wrapping, opened the box, and found a lovely cornflower blue house dress inside. It was the same house dress she had admired in the darkened window of a closed shop late that very afternoon. No one in that room, not her kids, nor her husband, could know the significance of that particular dress. To them, it was simply something blue and beautiful. But to Thelma, that was a fraction of the secret meaning it had for her. The last gift came with a name tag that specified Big George. He paused for a moment as if making a wish before blowing out the candles. He tore away the wrapping, and there inside was the same pair of shoes, colored cordovan and cream, size 9.5 AAA, that Thelma had given to a hobo in Oklahoma 6 years before. Thelma was right that these gifts came from someone who knew them well. But she was wrong to suggest they would ever step forward and take credit. No one ever did. And Thelma knew better than to look for them.